The emergency alarm cut through the quiet evening shift like a plasma blade through steel. Security Chief Vextar lifted his massive head from the duty report scattered across his desk, his four eyes immediately focusing on the flashing red display. The automated system never lied, and right now it was screaming about trouble at the Nebula's Rest Cantina. Code 7 disturbance, the computer announced in its cold, mechanical voice. Multiple life forms detected in violent confrontation. Stress pheromones at critical levels. Furniture destruction patterns consistent with combat. Vextar stood up slowly, his thick Gorvani hide rippling as his muscles tensed. In his 20 years of station security, he had seen every kind of trouble the galaxy could throw at a space station. Bar fights were common enough, but a Code 7 meant serious business. The computer only triggered that level when it detected real danger to life and property. He pressed the communication button on his collar with one of his 6 fingers. All units to the Nebula's Rest, full response team. Bring medical kits and restraint fields. The response was immediate. Officer Cree clicked her acknowledgement through her mandibles, the sound sharp and efficient. Sergeant Dulm simply grunted, which was his usual way of saying he understood. Within minutes, the security team was assembled in the corridor outside the cantina. Vextar looked at his team. 5 of the best security officers on the station stood ready. Cree, with her 4 arms and natural armor plating, was perfect for handling violent situations. Dulm was built like a moving mountain and could stop a charging Ryax with his bare hands. The others were equally capable in their own ways. What do we know? Asked Cree, her compound eyes reflecting the corridor lights. Vextar checked his datapad. Computer shows 6 combatants inside. We have a Krathari Berserker, 2 Zephyrian Shock Troopers, a Melody Warrior, a Theiss Enforcer, and a Corvin Heavy Fighter. He paused, reading the next line. And 1 human. The team exchanged glances. Humans were still relatively new to this part of the galaxy. Most species knew them as traders and diplomats, soft creatures who preferred talking to fighting. If a human was caught in the middle of a fight with 6 of the galaxy's most dangerous warrior species, there would not be much left to rescue. Poor creature, muttered Dulm, shaking his massive head. Probably got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The computer updates continued to stream in. Elevated stress pheromones from all Krathari, Zephyrian, Melody, Theiss, and Corvin subjects. Human subjects showing normal baseline readings. That was strange. Vextar frowned, his secondary eyes focusing on the data. When beings were in mortal danger, their stress levels should be through the roof. But the human was reading as calm as if nothing was happening. Maybe the human is already dead, suggested Officer Iral, her crystal-like features reflecting worry. Dead beings don't produce stress pheromones. The system would detect that, Vextar replied, but the explanation bothered him. Something was not right about this situation. The alarm continued to blare, but now it was joined by new information. Additional data. No weapons discharge detected. No energy signatures from standard combat equipment. Destruction patterns inconsistent with known weapon types. Vextar's confusion grew. A fight between 6 warrior-class beings should have involved plenty of weapons. These were not species that fought with their bare hands when they had access to blasters, vibroblades, and shock staffs. Yet the computer detected no weapon signatures at all. Move in, he ordered, drawing his own weapon. Full defensive formation. Medical team on standby. The team approached the cantina doors with practiced efficiency. They could hear sounds from inside now. Iku's groaning. The occasional thud of something heavy hitting the floor. And underneath it all, something that sounded like humming. Someone inside was humming a tune while a battle raged around them. On my mark, Vextar whispered, positioning himself at the door controls. His team spread out, weapons ready, medical scanners active. Whatever they found inside, they would be prepared for it. The plan was simple. Rush in, secure the scene, separate the combatants, and provide immediate medical attention to anyone who needed it. They had done this hundreds of times before. Bar fights might be ugly, but they were predictable. What they did not expect was silence. As Vextar's finger hovered over the door control, the sounds from inside changed. The groaning continued, but the combat noises stopped. The humming became clearer, a simple, peaceful melody that seemed completely out of place in a war zone. Ready? He asked his team. 5 sets of eyes or optical sensors focused on the door. Weapons were charged and ready. Medical kits were unsealed. Everyone was prepared for the worst. Vextar pressed the button and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. The team rushed forward, shouting orders and scanning for threats. Their training took over as they spread out to cover the room, looking for the wounded, the dangerous, and the dead. Instead, they found something that made no sense at all. The cantina was peaceful. Tables and chairs sat in perfect order. The lights were dim and welcoming. Soft music played from the entertainment system. The air smelled of cleaning solution and the faint aroma of various alien beverages. Behind the bar, a human male stood quietly polishing a glass with a white towel. He looked up as the security team burst in, and his face broke into a friendly smile. "Good evening, officers," he said in perfect galactic standard. "Can I get you anything to drink?" Vextar stopped so suddenly that Officer Iral nearly ran into his back. His weapon remained raised, but his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The computer had detected a massive fight. 6 dangerous warriors had been engaged in violent combat. The sensors had recorded stress levels that indicated mortal danger. Yet here was a human bartender, calmly cleaning glasses as if nothing had happened. "Where are the combatants?" Vextar demanded, his voice carrying the authority of years in security work. The human gestured casually around the room. "I think you'll find them scattered about. They seem to have had a bit too much to drink." It was then that Vextar noticed them. 6 figures lay around the cantina in various states of consciousness. A massive Krathari warrior was slumped against the far wall, breathing heavily and holding his head. 2 Zephyrian shock troopers were sprawled on the floor near the entrance, one completely unconscious and the other groaning softly. The others were in similar states, raw alive, but definitely not threatening anyone. The human continued cleaning his glass, humming the same peaceful tune they had heard from outside. "I'm Marcus Chen," the human said, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting gesture. "I'm the new bartender here. I don't think we've been properly introduced." Vextar stared at the offered hand, his mind still trying to make sense of the scene. His sensors were telling him that 6 of the galaxy's most dangerous fighters had been in combat just minutes ago. Now they were scattered around the room like discarded toys, while a pleasant human offered him a drink. Something very strange had happened in the Nebula's Rest Cantina, and Vextar had the feeling he was going to need all of his security training to figure out exactly what that something was. Vextar slowly lowered his weapon but kept his finger near the trigger. 20 years of security work had taught him that the most dangerous situations were often the ones that looked perfectly safe. "Step away from the bar," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority that had kept peace on the station for 2 decades. Marcus Chen raised his eyebrows in mild surprise but complied, setting down the glass and towel on the polished bar surface. He moved with easy, relaxed steps, his hands visible and open. Everything about his body language suggested he was exactly what he appeared to be, a friendly bartender who wanted to be helpful. "Of course, officer," Marcus said. "Is there a problem?" Vextar gestured for his team to spread out and check the fallen beings around the cantina. Officer Cree moved to the Krathari warrior first, her mandibles clicking as she ran her scanner over the massive figure. The Krathari was easily twice her size and covered in thick natural armor plating that could stop most small weapons. "This one's alive," she reported. "No serious injuries detected, but he appears to be dazed, showing signs of blunt force trauma to the head and torso." Sergeant Dalm had reached the 2 Zephyrian shock troopers. Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their speed and reflexes. Their natural electrical generation made them dangerous opponents who could stun enemies with a touch. Yet both of them lay motionless on the cantina floor. "These 2 are breathing," Dalm rumbled in his deep voice. "The unconscious one has bruising around the solar plexus. The other one keeps mumbling something about, how did he move so fast?" Officer Iral was examining the Melody warrior, her crystal hands moving carefully over the bird-like creature's wing structure. Melody were aerial fighters, using their natural flight ability and razor-sharp talons in combat. This one's wings were spread awkwardly, and his head turned back and forth in obvious confusion. "Wing strain and minor talon damage," she reported. "He keeps saying something about not being able to see his target clearly." The remaining officers checked the Thyssen Forcer and the Corvin Heavy Fighter. Both were conscious but clearly not in any condition to fight. The Thys, whose species was known for their venomous bite and incredible flexibility, was holding his jaw and hissing softly. The Corvin, built like a walking tank with natural shell armor, was sitting upright but swaying slightly as if his balance was off. Vextar processed the information his team was giving him. 6 dangerous warriors all taken down without any weapons being used. All alive, all relatively uninjured, but all clearly defeated. Meanwhile, the human stood calmly beside the bar looking as peaceful as someone waiting for a public transport. What happened here? Vextar demanded, focusing all 4 eyes on Marcus. Marcus seemed to consider the question carefully. Well, these gentlemen came in about an hour ago. They ordered drinks, which I was happy to provide. Then they started getting a bit rowdy with some of the other customers. He pointed to a corner where several other beings sat quietly, nursing their drinks and trying very hard to blend into the furniture. They looked like typical cantina customers and wow, a few traders, some off-duty workers, a couple of beings who might have been tourists. Rowdy how? Officer Cree asked, her compound eyes focusing on the human. Oh, the usual, Marcus said with a shrug. Insulting other species, making threats, that sort of thing. I asked them politely to tone it down or finish their drinks and leave. Vextar looked around the pristine cantina. And then? They took exception to my request, Marcus replied. They seemed to think that because I'm human, I wasn't worth listening to. They made some comments about soft species and suggested they might teach me some manners. The Krathari warrior groaned loudly from his position against the wall. How did he? That's not possible. Marcus glanced over at the massive figure with what looked like genuine concern. I do hope he's feeling better. Head injuries can be serious. Vextar felt his confusion growing. The evidence was clear or a row. A human bartender had somehow defeated 6 of the most dangerous warrior species in the known galaxy, but Marcus Chen looked about as threatening as a flower arrangement. You're saying you fought all 6 of them? Dulm asked, his mountain-like frame turning toward the human. I wouldn't call it fighting exactly, Marcus replied. More like asking them to leave. With emphasis. One of the Zephyrian shock troopers managed to sit up, his normally bright electrical field flickering weakly. He moved, the being gasped. Faster than should be possible. One moment we were advancing, the next? The next? Vextar prompted. The next moment we were on the floor, the Zephyrian finished, his voice filled with confusion and something that might have been respect. Officer Iral checked her scanner readings again. Chief, the stress pheromone levels from these 6 are still elevated, but they're showing patterns consistent with shock and confusion rather than anger or aggression. That was interesting. When warriors were defeated in combat, they usually showed continued aggression or fear. These 6 seemed more puzzled than anything else. Marcus moved back toward the bar, his movements still casual and unthreatening. Can I get anyone some water? Sometimes a bit of hydration helps after a misunderstanding. Stay where you are, Vextar ordered, though he was beginning to wonder if the human was actually dangerous or just incredibly lucky. Of course, Marcus said, stopping immediately and raising his hand slightly. I'm sorry if I've caused any confusion. I know this must look strange. Strange was an understatement. Vextar had seen combat between these species before. When a Krathari berserker fought a Zephyrian shock trooper, the result was usually significant property damage and serious injuries on both sides. When 6 dangerous fighters got into a brawl, the sensible thing was to call in military support and evacuate the civilian population. Yet the cantina looked like nothing had happened. No burn marks from energy weapons, no claw marks on the walls, no broken furniture or shattered glasses. Even the floor was clean. The automated systems detected massive combat, Vextar said slowly. Stress indicators that suggested mortal danger. But there's no evidence of a fight. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I did ask them to keep the noise down. I hate when customers disturb each other's peaceful evening. The Melody Warrior tried to stand, his wings fluttering unsteadily. Peaceful, he squawked. You call what you did peaceful? I call it efficient, Marcus replied with a gentle smile. Violence should always be a last resort, and when it becomes necessary, it should be concluded as quickly and safely as possible. Vextar found himself staring at the human. There was something about Marcus Chen that didn't fit the usual patterns. Most beings who could handle themselves in a fight showed some signs of it. Hour scars, calluses, weapon modifications, combat stance habits. Marcus looked like someone who had spent his entire life serving drinks and making pleasant conversation. But 6 dangerous warriors lay around his cantina, all defeated without any weapons being used and without any significant damage to the establishment. I think, Vexitar said slowly, We need to have a longer conversation about what exactly happened here. Marcus picked up his towel again and resumed cleaning the glass. I'd be happy to explain, officer. But could I suggest we let the medical team check on these gentlemen first? I want to make sure everyone is all right. Even in the middle of a security investigation, the human was more concerned about the beings who had attacked him than about his own situation. Vextar wasn't sure if that made Marcus incredibly noble or incredibly dangerous, possibly both. Medical teams arrived within minutes of Vextar's call, their equipment humming as they scanned and treated the 6 fallen warriors. None of the injuries were serious or woe, bruises, mild concussions, strained muscles, and wounded pride. Within an hour, 5 of the 6 were conscious and able to speak coherently. Vextar decided to interview the witnesses while the events were still fresh in their minds. He started with the customers who had been in the cantina when the trouble began. The first was a Zellian trader named Plix, whose large eyes had recorded the entire event with the natural precision of his species. Zellians never forgot anything they saw, which made them excellent witnesses. I was sitting over there, Plix said, pointing to a table near the wall with one of his 3 arms, having a quiet drink and reviewing cargo manifests. These 6 came in loud and aggressive. How aggressive? Officer Cree asked, her mandibles clicking as she took notes. They started immediately, Plix replied, making comments about inferior species and how the station was too soft to let weaklings have businesses here. The human just smiled and served their drinks. Vextar leaned forward. What exactly did they say to the human? Plix's large eyes blinked slowly as he accessed his perfect memory. The Crithari said humans were too weak to survive in the real galaxy. The Zephyrians laughed and said they could snap a human in half with one hand. The melody suggested they might test that theory. And how did Marcus respond? He kept polishing glasses and asked if they wanted anything to eat with their drinks. Plix said. Very polite, very calm. It seemed to make them angrier. The next witness was a Thorian engineer named Click, whose 4 arms moved nervously as she spoke. Thorians were naturally timid, preferring to avoid conflict whenever possible. They kept getting louder, Click explained. Started saying humans were parasites who didn't belong in space. Called them soft little diplomats who hid behind treaties because they couldn't fight. Did Marcus say anything to provoke them? Vextar asked. Nothing, Click replied firmly. He just listened and occasionally asked if they needed fresh drinks. But his attitude seemed to annoy them more. It was like they wanted him to get angry or scared, and he wouldn't do either. The third witness was an old Gorvani merchant named Tusk, whose species was related to Vextar's own. Tusk had been around long enough to see trouble coming from several star systems away. The breaking point came when they started bothering the other customers, Tusk rumbled. The Crithari grabbed Plix's manifest and threw it on the floor. Said weaklings didn't deserve to do business in warrior space. Vextar looked over at Plix, who nodded confirmation. That's when the human finally stopped smiling, Plix added. Marcus walked out from behind the bar, Tusk continued. Very calm, very polite. He picked up Plix's manifest, handed it back, and asked the 6 to settle their tab and leave. How did they respond to that? The Thys hissed and said no human was going to tell them what to do, Click answered. The Corvin stood up a Waur, you know how big they are, Aur, and said maybe they should teach the human his place in the galaxy. Vextar was getting a clearer picture now. 6 dangerous warriors, probably drunk and definitely looking for trouble, facing off against a lone human bartender who was just trying to keep peace in his establishment. That's when it happened, Tusk said quietly. Describe exactly what you saw, Vextar ordered. The 3 witnesses looked at each other, and Vextar could see they were struggling to put their experience into words. It was, Plix began, then stopped. I saw it clearly, but I'm not sure I believe what I saw. Try me, Vextar said. Plix's eyes focused as he accessed his perfect memory again. The Zephyrians moved first. They're fast, Aur. You know how their electrical systems give them enhanced reflexes. They came at the human from both sides, and the human wasn't there anymore, Click said softly. One moment he was standing between the tables. The next moment he was behind the first Zephyrian. The being was falling forward before he even realized he'd been hit. Tusk nodded agreement. The second Zephyrian tried to grab him, but the human moved like liquid, like he knew exactly where the attack was coming from before it happened. The Crithari charged next, Plix continued. You know how they fight a straightforward, overwhelming force. The human just stepped aside. put his hand on something, I think it was a bar stool there, and the Krathari ran right into it. Vextar frowned. A Krathari warrior in a rage could smash through a reinforced door. A simple bar stool shouldn't have been able to stop one. It wasn't the stool, Click explained, seeing his confusion. It was the timing. The human placed it exactly where the Krathari's momentum would carry him into it at just the right angle. The warrior basically defeated himself. The Melody tried to use his flight advantage, Tusk added, came at the human from above with his talons extended. But somehow the human was ready for that too, caught him mid-flight and redirected him into the wall. Gently, if you can believe that, gently. The bird being hit the wall hard enough to stun him, but not hard enough to break bones, Plix clarified. Like the human calculated exactly how much force was needed to stop the attack without causing serious injury. Vextar was beginning to understand why his sensors had detected such strange readings. What about the Thys and the Corvin? They hesitated after seeing the others go down so fast, Click said. I think they were trying to figure out what had happened. The human just stood there not even breathing hard and asked them again to leave peacefully. The Thys tried to bite him, Tusk continued. Their venom can paralyze most species, but the human caught his head abrow, just grabbed him behind the jaw where the venom sacs are, and pressure point paralyzed him instead. And the Corvin? The poor thing tried to tackle the human, Plix said. You know how they fight, or they use their weight and armor to crush opponents. The human just guided him past and let gravity do the work. The Corvin ended up tangled in a pile of chairs. Vextar looked around the cantina again. 6 of the galaxy's most dangerous fighters taken down in what sounded like less than a minute, using nothing but bar furniture and bare hands. How long did the whole thing take? He asked. The 3 witnesses looked at each other again. Maybe 30 seconds, Click suggested. Less, Plix said firmly. My internal chronometer says 22 seconds from the first Zephyrian's attack to the Corvin hitting the chairs. 22 seconds. Vextar had been in combat himself, and he knew how long fights lasted when dangerous beings went at each other seriously. This hadn't been a fight at all, and during all this, what was Marcus doing? Talking, Tusk said. The whole time he kept asking them to stop, saying he didn't want anyone to get hurt. Even while he was defending himself, he was trying to de-escalate the situation. Did he seem angry? Aggressive? That's the strangest part, Plix replied. He looked sad, like he was disappointed that it had come to violence. When it was over, the first thing he did was check to make sure everyone was still breathing. Vextar turned to look at Marcus, who was still standing patiently by the bar, occasionally answering questions from the medical team. The human caught his gaze and gave him a small, apologetic smile. Officers, Marcus called out politely. I've made some coffee if anyone would like some. It's a mild stimulant beverage from Earth. Might help everyone feel better. Even after defeating 6 warriors in combat, the human was offering refreshments to the security team. Vextar was beginning to realize that Marcus Chen was much more than a simple bartender. The question was exactly how much more. Vextar made his decision. I want to see the security footage. Officer Iral immediately began accessing the cantina's recording system through her portable terminal. Every public space on the station was monitored for safety and security purposes. The Nebula's Rest had 3 high-definition cameras that captured every angle of the main drinking area. Pulling up the recordings now, she announced, her crystal fingers dancing over the interface. Timestamp shows the incident began at 22:47 hours. The security team gathered around Iral's terminal, while Marcus continued his patient wait by the bar. The 6 defeated warriors had been moved to a corner table, where the medical team could monitor them more easily. Most were conscious now, though they still looked confused and somewhat embarrassed. Here we go, Iral said. Starting from when the 6 entered the establishment, the recording showed exactly what the witnesses had described. 6 large, obviously dangerous beings entered the cantina with the swagger that marked them as looking for trouble. They took a table in the center of the room and immediately began making loud comments about the other customers. Marcus appeared in the frame, approaching their table with drinks and a friendly smile. Even in the recording, his body language looked completely relaxed and non-threatening. He set down their beverages and said something that made them laugh, though not in a good way. Volume up, Vextar ordered. Hope you enjoy your stay on our station, Marcus was saying. If you need anything else, just let me know. What we need, the Krathari warrior growled, is for weakling species to learn their place in the galaxy. Marcus nodded politely. I understand the galaxy can seem competitive. More drinks? The conversation continued for several minutes, with the six becoming increasingly aggressive while Marcus remained friendly and professional. Vextar watched the human's face carefully. Most beings showed some reaction to threats and insults: anger, fear, nervousness. Marcus looked like he was discussing the weather. Fast forward to the confrontation, Vextar instructed. The recording jumped ahead to show the six warriors getting louder and beginning to bother other customers. Marcus emerged from behind the bar, picked up Plix's scattered manifests, and approached their table. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to settle your tab and move on," Marcus said calmly. "You're disturbing the other customers." What happened next was exactly as the witnesses had described, but seeing it in real time was entirely different from hearing about it. The two Zephyrian shock troopers moved first, their enhanced reflexes making them blur with speed as they attacked from both sides. Marcus seemed to simply sidestep, but the camera caught something else. His movement was precisely timed to put him exactly where he needed to be, when he needed to be there. The first Zephyrian strike missed by millimeters, his electrical field crackling harmlessly through empty air. As his momentum carried him forward, Marcus turned slightly and placed his hand on the being's shoulder. It looked like a gentle touch, but the Zephyrian immediately collapsed as if every muscle in his body had stopped working. The second Zephyrian tried to compensate, spinning to track his target's movement, but Marcus was already moving again, this time placing himself behind the attacker. Another gentle touch, this time to the base of the neck, and the second Zephyrian dropped like a power cell had been removed. "Replay that section," Vextar ordered quietly. They watched it again, and again. Each time the movement looked different. The first viewing had seemed like luck. The second looked like skill. The third time, Vextar began to understand what he was seeing. "He's not faster than them," Officer Kree observed, her compound eyes tracking every detail. "He's just exactly where he needs to be." "Look at his positioning," Dahlm added. "He's always moving to put their own momentum against them." The Kratari's charge was even more impressive on replay. The massive warrior came forward with enough force to punch through a bulkhead, but Marcus simply placed a bar stool in his path and guided the berserker's own attack into it. The result looked devastating, but the human had actually used the minimum force necessary. The Melody's aerial attack showed the same pattern. Marcus didn't fight the bird being's natural advantages where he used them. When the Melody dove from above, Marcus caught him and redirected his flight path into the wall with surgical precision. Hard enough to stun, not hard enough to cause permanent damage. "This is incredible," Iral whispered. "He's not overpowering them. He's using their own attacks against them." The Thys and Corvin attacks were equally educational. Both times, Marcus seemed to know exactly where the strike was coming from before it happened. His counters were efficient and precisely calibrated to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary harm. "Total engagement time," Iral reported. Checking the recording timestamps, was 21.7 seconds. Vextar stared at the screen. In his 20 years of security work, he had never seen anything like it. The human had moved with the kind of efficiency that usually required extensive combat, training, and years of experience. "Run a background check on Marcus. Chen," he ordered Kree. "I want to know everything about him." While they waited for the results, Vextar approached Marcus directly. The human looked up from the glass he was cleaning with that same friendly expression. "That was quite a performance," Vextar said carefully. Marcus shrugged modestly. "I try to resolve conflicts with minimal harm to everyone involved." "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Oh, I wouldn't call it fighting," Marcus replied. "More like conflict resolution with a physical component." Vextar's four eyes focused intently on the human. "That's not an answer." Marcus considered this for a moment. "I used to work in security myself back on Earth. Different kind of security than yours, but the principles are similar. De-escalate when possible. Act decisively when necessary." "What kind of security?" "Government work mostly," Marcus said vaguely. "After a while, I decided I preferred serving drinks to serving warrants. Less paperwork, better hours, and people are generally happier to see you." Before Vextar could ask more questions, Kree called out from her terminal. "Chief, you need to see this background information." Vexitar walked over to read the results, and his secondary hearts nearly stopped beating. Marcus Chen, age 34, originally from Earth's North American continent, former member of Earth's Special Operations Division, served in 12 different conflict zones across human space, specialized in what human military called asymmetric warfare and close-quarters combat. Decorated for actions that were mostly classified, but the few details available mentioned extraordinary service in hostile territory and exceptional performance under extreme conditions. After his military service, Marcus had worked for something called the Earth Diplomatic Security Service, protecting human ambassadors and negotiators in dangerous situations across the galaxy. His files showed commendations for preventing international incidents through skilled intervention and maintaining peace through strategic application of force. 6 months ago, Marcus Chen had resigned from government service and applied for civilian work permits. His application listed his desired profession as hospitality services. He quit being a professional soldier to become a bartender, Cree said in amazement. Vextar looked back at Marcus, who was now humming softly while he arranged bottles on the shelf behind the bar. The human caught his gaze and smiled. "Everything all right, officer?" "Mr. Chen," Vextar said slowly, "I think we need to have a much longer conversation about your qualifications for this position." Marcus's smile widened slightly. "I make an excellent Martian sunset if you're interested. It's a very relaxing drink." Somehow Vextar suspected that Marcus Chen could make a lot more than drinks, and that relaxing was probably the last thing he would be doing for the rest of his shift. 2 hours later, Vextar sat in his office with Marcus Chen across from his desk, sharing what the human had promised would be an excellent cup of coffee. The beverage was indeed excellent, rich, complex, and providing exactly the kind of mild stimulation that helped clear his thoughts after a confusing evening. "So," Vextar began, setting down his cup, "former special operations, diplomatic security decorated veteran, and you decided to become a bartender." Marcus nodded, completely relaxed in his chair. "That's right. Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out the office window at the stars beyond the station. "Do you know what the most dangerous thing about my old job was, Chief Vextar? I would imagine the combat situations." "No," Marcus said softly. "The most dangerous thing was how easy it became. After a while, violence stops feeling like a last resort and starts feeling like an efficient solution. When you're very good at stopping threats, you start seeing threats everywhere." Vexatar understood that feeling. Security work could make anyone paranoid if they weren't careful. "I realized I was becoming someone I didn't want to be," Marcus continued, "so I decided to try something different. Bartending seemed like a good choice, Rao. You still help people solve their problems, but usually the problems are much smaller, and the solutions involve conversation instead of combat. But you brought those skills with you." Marcus smiled. "You can't unlearn training like that, but you can choose how to use it. Tonight those 6 were going to hurt innocent people. I couldn't let that happen, but I also didn't want to hurt them any more than necessary." Vextar thought about the security footage again. "You could have seriously injured them, maybe even killed them." "Yes," Marcus agreed quietly. "That's exactly why I was so careful not to." The door chimed and Officer Cree entered with a report pad. "Chief, the 6 troublemakers are ready to be released. Medical says they're fine, bruised egos more than anything else." "What's their attitude?" Vextar asked. "Respectful," Cree replied with obvious surprise. "Very respectful. The Krathari actually asked if he could apologize to Mr. Chen personally." Marcus stood up. "I should get back to work. The evening shift will be starting soon and people will want drinks." As he reached the door, Vextar called out, "Marcus, will there be any more incidents like tonight?" The human paused and considered the question seriously. "I don't think so. Word travels fast on a space station. By tomorrow everyone will know what happened at the nebula's rest. And what exactly will they know?" Marcus turned back with that same gentle smile. "They'll know that the human bartender is not someone you want to test. But more importantly, they'll know that he's someone who will protect customers who just want to drink in peace." After Marcus left, Vextar sat back in his chair and thought about what he had learned. The galaxy was full of dangerous species and beings with natural weapons, enhanced strength, advanced technology, or generations of warrior culture. Humans had none of those obvious advantages. What they had instead was something much more subtle and perhaps much more dangerous. They had adaptability. Where other species specialized, humans generalized. They learned whatever skills they needed for whatever situation they faced. A human could be a diplomat one day and a soldier the next. They could study alien cultures until they understood them better than the aliens themselves, then use that knowledge to fight those same aliens if necessary. They were dangerous not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were unpredictable. Marcus Chen was a perfect example. He looked like a simple bartender, but he carried the skills of a professional warrior. He could serve drinks with a smile and disable 6 attackers without breaking a sweat. Most importantly, he could choose which set of skills to use based on what the situation required. The door chimed again, and Dalm entered. "Chief, we've got the final report from the medical team. All 6 of the fighters are being released with standard warnings about public disturbance. How are they taking it?" Dalm's massive frame shook with what might have been laughter. The Krathari asked if the station offers any training programs in human-style combat techniques. I told him he'd have to ask Mr. Chen about that. Vextar activated his terminal and began updating the station's security protocols. Under the section for potential threats, he added a new category: human civilians with undisclosed backgrounds. The notation read, "Humans may possess combat training, technical skills, or other capabilities not apparent from their stated profession or appearance. Recommend standard respectful treatment and avoid assumptions about capabilities based on physical appearance or current occupation." He paused, then added, "Note: this appears to be a general human characteristic rather than an individual anomaly. Suggest all station personnel be advised." 3 days later, Vextar was making his regular patrol rounds when he passed the Nebula's Rest. Through the open doorway, he could see Marcus behind the bar chatting pleasantly with customers while he mixed drinks. The cantina was busier than usual, and the atmosphere seemed more relaxed than it had been in months. At one table, he spotted the Krathari warrior from the incident, sharing drinks with several other beings and gesturing enthusiastically while he told a story. The others listened with fascination, occasionally glancing over at Marcus with expressions of respect and curiosity. Vextar decided to stop in for a drink himself. As he approached the bar, Marcus looked up with his characteristic friendly smile. "Evening, Chief, what can I get you?" "That coffee you mentioned," Vextar replied. "And maybe some information." "Coffee I can definitely provide," Marcus said, reaching for equipment behind the bar. "Information depends on what kind you're looking for. I've been thinking about our conversation, about human adaptability." Marcus began preparing the coffee with practiced efficiency. "What about it?" "I'm wondering if this is something all humans have or just former military." Marcus paused in his work and looked thoughtful. "You know, Chief, I think most humans would have handled tonight differently than I did. Probably would have called for help instead of handling it personally. But they could have handled it if they needed to. Maybe not the same way, but somehow yes. Humans are good at figuring out solutions when they need to. We don't like to give up easily." Vextar accepted his coffee and took a careful sip. It was, as promised, excellent. "The galaxy is going to have to rethink its assumptions about your species." Marcus resumed his drink preparation for other customers. "I hope that's a good thing. For beings who like peace and quiet, definitely. For beings who like to start trouble?" Vextar smiled, showing teeth. "They might want to find a different station." As he left the cantina, Vextar reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The station felt safer, not because they had added more security, but because potential troublemakers now knew that even the most harmless-looking human might be far more than they appeared. It was, he decided, a very human way to keep the peace a broro, by making everyone else decide for themselves that starting trouble wasn't worth the risk. Behind him, Marcus continued serving drinks and making conversation, looking every inch the simple bartender. But now everyone knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially when it came to humans. The galaxy was going to be a much more interesting place now that humanity had joined it. And probably a much more peaceful one too. As long as everyone remembered the lesson learned at the Nebula's Rest: never assume you know what a human is capable of until you've seen them handle a real problem. Marcus Chen had wanted a quiet job serving drinks. Instead, he had become a teacher, showing the galaxy that humans were far more than they seemed. It was, Vextar thought, probably the most effective diplomacy lesson anyone had ever given, without saying a word about politics or treaties. Sometimes the best way to keep the peace was simply to demonstrate that you were prepared for war, but preferred not to use that preparation unless absolutely necessary. Very human indeed.